Crisis Response and Disaster Risk Reduction, a comprehensive guide. Introduction. Disasters are not only about the natural forces that cause them, they are about people, places, and the systems we create. Whether it's a hurricane that batters a coastal town, a pandemic that shuts down cities, or a war that displaces millions, the impact of a crisis is always magnified by our level of preparedness and our ability to respond swiftly and effectively. In recent decades, the frequency and intensity of disasters have increased. Climate change has made weather patterns more erratic, technological dependence has created new vulnerabilities, and global interconnectedness means that crises in one part of the world often ripple far beyond their point of origin. From the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami to the COVID-19 pandemic, and from the Haiti earthquake to the war in Ukraine, we have been reminded repeatedly that no nation is immune to disaster. Yet we have also seen inspiring examples of resilience, communities coming together, first responders risking their lives, and governments adapting to challenges with innovative solutions. This course is about understanding both the risks and the responses. It's about preparing for the worst while building toward a safer future. What this course covers. This guide is divided into 5 parts. Understanding disasters and crises. Definitions, types, causes, and vulnerabilities that shape how disasters affect different regions and populations. Crisis response mechanisms. How emergencies are handled from the moment they strike, including coordination, logistics, and communication. Disaster risk reduction (DRR). Strategies to reduce vulnerability and strengthen resilience, from infrastructure planning to community-based action. Global systems and case studies. The role of international organizations, real-world examples of disaster management, and lessons learned from past crises. Building resilience. Long-term efforts in psychological recovery, education, governance, and adaptation to future risks. Why this matters. The difference between disaster and catastrophe often lies in how we prepare. Effective disaster risk reduction not only saves lives, but reduces economic losses, protects development gains, and supports sustainable communities. Crisis response, on the other hand, ensures that when the unthinkable does happen, people are not left to fend for themselves. Whether you're a policy advisor, a student of emergency management, a humanitarian worker, or simply a concerned citizen, this course aims to equip you with knowledge and tools that matter. It encourages a proactive, inclusive, and science-based approach to managing both sudden shocks and slow-building crises. In a world where disaster risk is increasing, we cannot afford to be reactive. We must be resilient, informed, and prepared. Part 1. Types of disasters. Disasters may strike suddenly or build over time, but regardless of their speed or form, they disrupt lives, damage economies, and challenge the resilience of communities. To respond effectively, we must first understand what kinds of disasters exist and how they differ in terms of origin, impact, and management. What is a disaster? A disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or society that causes widespread human, material, economic, or environmental losses. Disasters overwhelm local capacity and require external assistance. Disasters are often described by their cause, whether natural, technological, or human-induced, but it's important to remember that their impact is not just about the hazard itself. Vulnerability, exposure, and preparedness are key factors in turning a hazard into a disaster. Natural disasters. These are caused by natural processes of the earth and atmosphere. Some are sudden and intense, others are slow onset and cumulative. Geophysical disasters. Earthquakes result from the sudden release of energy in the Earth's crust. Volcanic eruptions, explosive events that release lava, ash, and gas. Tsunamis, often caused by undersea earthquakes or landslides. Hydrometeorological disasters. Floods can result from heavy rainfall, dam failures, or snowmelt. Tropical cyclones, known as hurricanes or typhoons depending on the region. Droughts, extended periods of deficient rainfall leading to water shortages. Wildfires, fueled by dry conditions, heat and wind, often climate exacerbated. Climate-related disasters. Climate change is increasing the frequency and severity of many natural disasters. Rising sea levels, changing weather patterns, and extreme temperatures all contribute to disaster risk. Technological disasters. These are also called man-made or anthropogenic disasters, and result from failures of technology or industrial processes. Industrial accidents. Chemical spills, toxic exposure from factory or transport accidents, e.g. Bhopal gas tragedy. Nuclear accidents, such as the Chernobyl or Fukushima disasters. Infrastructure failures. Dam breaks, sudden flooding and destruction downstream. Power grid failures can cause cascading effects in urban areas. Cyber disasters. As we grow more dependent on digital infrastructure, cyber attacks pose risks to power systems, communication networks, and critical infrastructure. Biological disasters. These involve the spread of disease, either through natural processes or accidental human-driven causes. Epidemics and pandemics. Ebola, regionally contained but highly fatal. COVID-19, a global pandemic that affected every aspect of life. Zoonotic diseases, diseases that jump from animals to humans, e.g. SARS, avian flu. Biological threats can also include agricultural plagues, invasive species, and antimicrobial resistance. Complex humanitarian emergencies. Some crises are multidimensional, with overlapping causes like conflict, food insecurity, and displacement. Conflict and war. Armed conflict often causes mass casualties, destroys infrastructure, and displaces entire populations. Forced migration. Refugee crises, often the result of war, persecution, or environmental degradation. Internally displaced persons, IDPs, people forced to flee within their own countries. Famine. Famine is rarely just about a lack of food. It is often the product of conflict, governance failure, and economic collapse. Cascading and compound disasters. Modern disasters are rarely isolated. An earthquake may cause a tsunami, which damages a nuclear plant, which then triggers a public health emergency. These compound disasters challenge response mechanisms and test resilience. Classification systems. Organizations like the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, and the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters, CRED, classify disasters using standardized terms and data systems, e.g. MDAT. Such classifications help in comparing disaster trends over time, prioritizing resource allocation, designing targeted response mechanisms. Conclusion. Disasters are diverse and dynamic. Some are natural in origin, but worsened by human actions. Others are entirely man-made. By classifying and understanding these events, we lay the groundwork for developing appropriate response and mitigation strategies. The next part will examine the factors that make certain populations more vulnerable, and how risk is unevenly distributed across the globe. Part 2. Risk factors and vulnerabilities. Understanding disasters isn't just about understanding the hazards themselves. It's about understanding who is affected, why, and how severely. The same earthquake can result in minor injuries in one city and widespread destruction in another. This difference is often due to risk factors and vulnerabilities that shape a population's ability to withstand and recover from a crisis. What is vulnerability? Vulnerability refers to the conditions determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or processes that increase the susceptibility of a community to the impacts of hazards. In other words, vulnerability is not simply about exposure to a hazard, it's about the inability to cope with it. It is deeply linked to inequality, development, and access to resources. Dimensions of vulnerability. Physical vulnerability. Quality of buildings and infrastructure. Location, e.g., on a fault line, floodplain, or coastal zone. Access to transportation or evacuation routes. Social vulnerability. Age, children and the elderly are more at risk. Gender, women often bear the brunt in post-disaster settings. Disability and health status. Discrimination and marginalization. Economic vulnerability. Poverty limits access to housing, insurance, and recovery resources. Informal employment can be disrupted without compensation. Dependence on a single economic sector, e.g., tourism, agriculture. Environmental vulnerability. Deforestation, erosion, and poor land use practices increase disaster risk. Unsustainable urban development reduces the resilience of cities. Climate change intensifies hazards, e.g., droughts, heat waves. The risk equation. Disaster risk is commonly understood through a simplified formula. Risk equals hazard times exposure times vulnerability. Hazard is the potential event, e.g., hurricane, landslide. Exposure is what's in harm's way, people, infrastructure, environment. Vulnerability is the susceptibility to harm. Reducing disaster risk means lowering exposure and vulnerability, even if the hazard itself cannot be prevented. Urbanization and risk. More than half of the world's population now lives in cities, and by 2050, this number is expected to exceed 70%. Rapid and unplanned urban growth has introduced new risks. Informal settlements on unsafe land, e.g., hillsides, floodplains. Overburdened infrastructure and services. Increased reliance on complex interdependent systems, power, water, transport. Megacities in the global south often face the dual challenge of growth and vulnerability. Urban poor populations are often excluded from official disaster planning and live in high-risk areas with little to no protection. Poverty and inequality as risk multipliers. Poverty doesn't just make it harder to recover from disasters, it increases the chances of becoming a victim in the first place. Poor communities often live in structurally unsound housing, lack savings or insurance, depend on day-to-day income with no buffer, have limited access to healthcare and information. Inequality also plays a role. Even in wealthier countries, marginalized groups, e.g., ethnic minorities, undocumented migrants, often face greater disaster impacts due to discrimination, language barriers, or lack of representation in planning processes. Gender and vulnerability. Gender roles and power dynamics affect vulnerability and capacity in many ways. In some societies, women have limited access to warning systems or resources. Gender-based violence can increase after disasters. Women often play a central role in caregiving and recovery, but may not be included in formal decision-making. At the same time, women are not just victims. They are often leaders in local-level disaster risk reduction and community resilience. Special vulnerable groups. Certain groups require special attention in disaster planning and response. Children, more susceptible to injury, illness, and psychological trauma. Elderly, may face mobility challenges or chronic health conditions. People with disabilities, often overlooked in evacuation or warning systems. Refugees and IDPs face extreme risk with limited access to protection. Inclusive disaster risk reduction strategies recognize these differences and plan accordingly. Systemic risk and interconnectedness. Modern societies are deeply interconnected. A drought in one region can cause food shortages globally. A pandemic can trigger economic recessions. This systemic risk means we must think beyond geographic borders and plan for cascading effects. Examples: COVID-19 disrupted global supply chains, education, and health systems simultaneously. Cyber attacks on utility grids can halt emergency response systems. Political instability can paralyze disaster aid distribution. Conclusion: risk and vulnerability are not accidental. They are shaped by choices, political, economic, social, and environmental. Reducing disaster risk is not just about managing hazards, it's about building equity, inclusion, and resilience. In the next part, we'll explore how early warning systems serve as one of the most critical tools in reducing disaster risk and saving lives before a crisis strikes. Part 3: Early Warning Systems. Imagine if communities had a head start before disaster struck. Time to evacuate, secure resources, or move to safer ground. That's the power of an early warning system, EWS. These systems are a cornerstone of effective disaster risk reduction, often making the difference between life and death. This part explores how early warnings are developed, delivered, and acted upon, and why they must be people-centered to be effective. What is an early warning system? An early warning system is a set of coordinated procedures that monitors risks, detects hazards, forecasts likely events, and disseminates timely information to at-risk populations, allowing them to take protective action. A complete EWS consists of 4 interconnected components. Risk knowledge, understanding what hazards might occur and who could be affected. Monitoring and warning, detecting and forecasting hazards in real time. Dissemination and communication, sending alerts through accessible channels. Response capability, ensuring people know what to do when a warning is received. All 4 components must work in harmony. A failure in one part, like unclear messaging or inaccessible communication, can render the entire system ineffective. Types of hazards monitored. Early warning systems can be tailored to a wide range of hazards. Meteorological, hurricanes, storms, heatwaves, heavy rainfall. Geological, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. Hydrological, floods, droughts, dam failures. Biological, disease outbreaks, pandemics. Technological, industrial accidents, cyber threats, chemical leaks. Some hazards, like cyclones, allow for hours or days of warning. Others, like earthquakes, may offer only seconds. EWS must be calibrated to the speed and predictability of the hazard. Tools and technologies in early warning. Advancements in science and technology have revolutionized early warning capabilities. Satellite monitoring and remote sensing. Used to track weather patterns, sea surface temperatures, deforestation, etc. Agencies like NASA, NOAA, and ESA provide real-time data. 3.3.2 Seismic and ocean buoy networks. Seismic sensors detect earthquakes and volcanic activity. Buoys measure sea level changes for tsunami prediction. AI and machine learning. Algorithms analyze historical and real-time data to predict patterns. AI can help model flood zones, disease spread, and wildfire risks. GIS and mapping tools. Geographical information systems allow responders to visualize risk zones. GIS is used to map vulnerable populations and evacuation routes. Communication channels for warnings. A warning is only effective if it reaches the people at risk, clearly, quickly, and accessibly. Traditional channels. Sirens, community radios, TV broadcasts. Loudspeakers, church bells, and school announcements in rural areas. Digital channels. SMS alerts, push notifications, apps. Social media platforms, e.g., Twitter alerts, WhatsApp groups. Community-based systems. Local watch groups trained to issue alerts. Use of local languages and culturally appropriate messaging. Multiple communication channels should be used simultaneously to reach different groups, especially those with limited access to digital tools. Community involvement in early warning. A top-down system that doesn't consider local realities is unlikely to succeed. Community-based early warning systems, CBEWS, empower local actors and ensure that warnings are relevant and actionable. Key features: training local leaders and volunteers, integrating indigenous knowledge, e.g., animal behavior, cloud patterns, participatory risk mapping, practicing response drills based on local context. The last mile of a warning system, the point where people actually receive and act on the message, is often the weakest link. Community engagement strengthens that link. Barriers to effective early warning. Despite technological progress, many EWS still face challenges. Lack of data or monitoring infrastructure in low-income countries. Language and literacy barriers. Gender-based exclusion from warning channels. Public distrust in authorities or warnings due to past inaction. Technical failures, e.g., power outages, broken sensors. Overcoming these challenges requires not just better tech, but inclusive design, governance, and trust building. Global initiatives for early warning. Several global efforts aim to make early warning systems more accessible and universal. UN's Early Warnings for All initiative aims to provide EWS coverage to every person on Earth by 2027. World Meteorological Organization, WMO, develops forecasting tools and supports capacity building. IFRC's forecast-based financing prepositions aid before a disaster based on risk forecasts. Donor support, policy alignment, and national commitment are critical to making early warnings universal. Conclusion: a well-designed early warning system saves lives, reduces economic losses, and empowers communities. It represents the front line of disaster risk reduction, and is one of the most cost-effective ways to protect populations. But for an early warning system to work, it must be inclusive, actionable, and trusted by those it serves. Part 4: First Response and Emergency Services. When a disaster strikes, the initial moments are critical. Lives hang in the balance. Infrastructure may be compromised. Panic can spread. In these high-stakes scenarios, first responders and emergency services play an essential role in stabilizing the situation, rescuing survivors, and laying the groundwork for longer-term recovery. This part explores how the immediate response phase works, who is involved, and what factors influence its effectiveness. The Golden Hour. The Golden Hour refers to the crucial first hour after a traumatic event. Rapid medical care, search and rescue, and life-saving actions during this time significantly increase survival rates. Effective crisis response during this period depends on preparedness and training, speed and coordination, access to critical infrastructure, roads, communication lines, availability of emergency personnel and resources. Who are the first responders? First responders are the frontline personnel who arrive at the scene of a disaster to provide immediate assistance. They include emergency medical services, EMS, provide first aid, triage, and transport to hospitals, set up mobile clinics in large-scale emergencies, firefighters, conduct search and rescue, extinguish fires, and manage hazardous materials. Often trained in basic medical response. Police and security forces. Secure the area, control crowds, prevent looting. Assist with evacuations and road management. Coordinate with local government and responders. Search and rescue SAR teams. Specialized units trained in locating and retrieving victims from debris. Can include urban SAR, mountain rescue, and maritime rescue. Civil defense and community volunteers. Local people are often the true first responders, acting before formal services arrive. Community-based disaster response teams are vital, especially in rural or underserved areas. Principles of effective first response. Rapid mobilization. Speed is essential. The longer it takes to deploy resources, the higher the human toll. Pre-positioned supplies and pre-trained teams are key. Coordination and command. Clear roles, communication, and a unified chain of command prevent chaos. Most emergency systems use models like the Incident Command System, ICS, to manage response. Triage and prioritization. Medical teams must quickly assess who needs care most urgently. Common triage categories include immediate, life-threatening; delayed, serious but can wait; minor, walking wounded; deceased beyond help. Safety of responders. Responders operate in dangerous conditions. Safety protocols, protective gear, and mental health support are crucial to sustain operations. Logistics and supply chain management. Efficient logistics are the backbone of disaster response. Poor planning can lead to bottlenecks, duplication, or wasted resources. Key elements include pre-staging supplies, water, fuel, medical kits; securing transportation, trucks, helicopters, boats; inventory management systems; collaboration with local businesses and NGOs; technology like drones, GPS, and mobile inventory apps can improve speed and accuracy in the field. Communication and information flow. Information management is just as important as physical response. Emergency Operations Centers, EOCs, are activated to centralize information. Real-time updates help allocate resources and issue public alerts. Mobile apps and radios remain essential in areas with disrupted networks. Misinformation is a major risk. Official channels must be clear and trusted. Barriers to effective response. Even well-prepared systems can encounter obstacles. Infrastructure damage, roads, bridges, and airports may be unusable. Limited access, conflict zones or remote areas pose unique challenges. Cultural language barriers can slow communication or reduce trust. Overwhelming scale, local responders may be outmatched by the magnitude of the event. Mitigating these challenges requires pre-disaster planning, cross-agency training, and international cooperation. International humanitarian response. In large-scale disasters, international agencies may deploy specialized teams and resources, including United Nations Disaster Assessment and Coordination, UNDAC; International Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement; Emergency Medical Teams, EMTs, from WHO; Military and Civilian Response Teams from donor nations. Coordination with national governments is critical to avoid overlap or misdirection of aid. The role of technology. Modern tools are transforming first response capabilities. Drones search inaccessible areas, deliver supplies, assess damage. AI and predictive analytics prioritize high-risk areas. Body-worn cameras help document operations for accountability. Wearables monitor responder health in extreme conditions. Technology is a force multiplier, but it must be adapted to the context and not replace local knowledge. Psychological first aid. Disasters are traumatic. First responders are increasingly trained to deliver psychological first aid, PFA, a humane, supportive response to people suffering from stress or trauma. PFA helps survivors feel safe, connect with loved ones, access support services, begin emotional recovery. Conclusion. First response is the critical bridge between disaster impact and long-term recovery. It requires speed, coordination, compassion, and adaptability. Whether performed by professionals or ordinary citizens, early action saves lives and shapes the future of recovery. Part 5. Disaster Coordination and Multi-Agency Response. When disaster strikes, it's not just one organization or sector that responds, it's many, from local governments and NGOs to international aid agencies and military units. Coordinating all these actors effectively is both a logistical and political challenge. Done well, it amplifies impact and prevents duplication. Done poorly, it can lead to chaos, delays, and even harm. This part explores the architecture of disaster coordination and how diverse agencies align their roles during crisis situations. Why coordination matters. Disaster response is inherently multi-sectoral. Different agencies bring different strengths. Health agencies handle medical needs. Engineers restore power and water. NGOs deliver food and shelter. Government agencies manage policies and public safety. Without coordination, aid can be duplicated in some areas and absent in others. Critical needs might be overlooked. Resources can be wasted. Communities may lose trust in responders. Coordination is not just logistics, it's about leadership, communication, and strategy. Levels of coordination. Local level. Municipal governments and civil defense agencies lead the response. Local NGOs, community groups, and health centers play a key role. Immediate coordination often happens through Emergency Operations Centers, EOCs. National level. National Disaster Management Authorities, NDMAs, oversee the big picture. Ministries coordinate sectoral responses, e.g., health, infrastructure, defense. National policies and frameworks guide priorities and resource allocation. International level. United Nations agencies, e.g., OCHA, WHO, WFP, lead global coordination. International NGOs, e.g., Save the Children, Médecins Sans Frontières, operate in affected areas. Bilateral support, e.g., USAID, DFID, provides technical and financial assistance. The cluster system. The cluster approach is a global coordination mechanism used primarily in humanitarian emergencies. Each cluster is a group of agencies working in a particular sector. Clusters meet regularly to share data and needs assessments, coordinate actions geographically, avoid gaps and overlaps, plan for resource mobilization. Incident Command Systems, ICS. Many countries adopt the Incident Command System, ICS, for domestic disaster coordination. ICS is a standardized hierarchical structure used to manage emergencies of all sizes. Core elements include Unified Command, ensures multiple agencies work under a common structure. Modular organization, scales to fit the size of the emergency. Clear roles, operations, logistics, planning, finance. ICS enhances efficiency, reduces confusion, and helps teams from different backgrounds work as one. Coordination tools and platforms. Modern coordination relies on both in-person and digital tools. Humanitarian Response Platform, a central data hub for UN-coordinated crises. ReliefWeb shares real-time updates, maps, and analysis. DHI's 2 and Kobo Toolbox, used for rapid assessments and field data collection. 4W's mapping, who does what, where, when, helps identify coverage and gaps. Civil Military Coordination, CMCORD. Armed forces often have unmatched logistical and technical capacity. However, coordination with civilian actors requires careful planning to avoid perception of militarization, protect humanitarian space, respect international humanitarian law. CMCORD officers serve as bridges between military and civilian response, especially during large-scale disasters. Private sector and humanitarian coordination. Businesses increasingly contribute to disaster response through donations and in-kind support. Supply chain logistics. Communications infrastructure. Innovation, e.g., tech solutions, mobile banking. Public-private partnerships must be transparent, ethical, and aligned with community needs to avoid disaster capitalism or dependency. Coordination challenges. Even the best systems face difficulties. Information overload or lack of verified data. Competition for visibility or funding. Language and cultural barriers. Weak government structures. Access restrictions due to conflict or natural barriers. Overcoming these challenges requires trust, pre-established relationships, and commitment to shared humanitarian principles. Accountability and coordination. Coordination is not just about action, it's about accountability. Are services reaching the most vulnerable? Are affected communities involved in decisions? Are responders upholding humanitarian principles? Mechanisms like accountability to affected populations, AAP, and feedback hotlines ensure that coordination remains centered on the needs and rights of survivors. Conclusion. In complex disasters, no single actor can meet every need. Effective coordination is about building a shared vision, aligning resources, and fostering collaboration, before, during, and after emergencies. It's the glue that binds the many moving parts of crisis response into a cohesive effort. Part 6: Recovery and Reconstruction. When the dust settles, and the immediate threat has passed, communities are left facing the long road to recovery. This phase is not just about rebuilding structures, it's about restoring lives, livelihoods, and dignity. Effective recovery blends emergency response with long-term development, creating a more resilient and equitable future. In this part, we explore the recovery and reconstruction process, its phases, and how it can become a powerful opportunity for transformation. What is recovery? Recovery refers to the actions taken to restore and improve the livelihoods, housing, health, education, and overall well-being of people affected by a disaster. It is both short-term, restoring basic functions, and long-term, rebuilding communities and systems. Recovery includes restoring essential services, electricity, water, transport. Rebuilding homes, hospitals, and schools. Supporting mental health and psychosocial well-being. Re-establishing governance and local economies. Strengthening future disaster resilience. Phases of post-disaster recovery. Recovery is not linear, it evolves through overlapping phases. Emergency relief, 0 to 3 months. Focuses on life-saving aid, shelter, food, water, medical care. Often managed by humanitarian organizations and local governments. Early recovery, 3 to 12 months. Restores basic services and begins debris clearance. Starts to rebuild institutions and restore livelihoods. Transitional shelter and cash for work programs are common. Reconstruction and development, 1 to 5 years. Rebuilding of permanent infrastructure and housing. Investment in long-term planning and capacity building. Aims to build back better. Each phase should ideally overlap and inform the next, with flexible funding and community participation throughout. Build Back Better, BBB. Build Back Better is a guiding principle in modern disaster recovery. It emphasizes reconstructing safer, more resilient buildings and infrastructure. Addressing underlying vulnerabilities and social inequalities. Embedding climate adaptation and sustainability into rebuilding. Example: after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, many countries introduced stronger coastal building codes and early warning systems as part of BBB strategies. Community-led recovery. Recovery is most effective when it's community-driven. Key elements of community-led recovery. Involving affected people in planning and decision-making. Hiring local workers and sourcing local materials. Respecting cultural norms and practices. Ensuring inclusion of marginalized groups, women, elderly, disabled. Ownership leads to sustainability and helps restore dignity after loss. Housing and infrastructure reconstruction. Shelter is a basic human need. Post-disaster housing recovery must balance speed with quality. Temporary shelters. Rapidly deployed, but not suitable for long-term use. Can create dependency if not well managed. Transitional shelters. Provide greater durability and privacy. Often designed to be upgraded to permanent homes. Permanent housing. Should meet safety standards and reflect local needs. Reconstruction offers a chance to improve land use and zoning policies. Infrastructure recovery must also prioritize roads, bridges, and transport networks, power grids and water systems, public buildings like schools and clinics, livelihood restoration. Disasters often disrupt entire economies. Recovery must include strategies to revive employment and income. Cash for work programs offer short-term income and help with cleanup rebuilding. Microfinance and business grants support entrepreneurs and small businesses. Agricultural support, seeds, tools, livestock to restart food production. Skills training helps workers adapt to changed job markets. Livelihood programs should target the most vulnerable and be adaptable to urban and rural contexts. Mental health and psychosocial recovery. The psychological toll of disasters is immense. People may face trauma, grief, anxiety, and loss of identity. Recovery programs should include mental health services and counseling, safe spaces for children and women, community support groups, culturally appropriate healing practices. Supporting emotional recovery is critical to holistic resilience. Governance and institutional recovery. Local institutions often suffer during disasters. Restoring governance is essential for accountability and long-term stability. Recovery involves rebuilding civil registries and local administrations, re-establishing public services, supporting rule of law and anti-corruption efforts, strengthening disaster management capacity. Good governance ensures transparency, equity, and efficiency in rebuilding efforts. Financing recovery. Post-disaster recovery is expensive and complex. It requires coordinated financing from national budgets and contingency funds, international aid and donor agencies, insurance and risk transfer mechanisms, public-private partnerships, diaspora, and community remittances. Financial planning must align with long-term development goals, not just quick fixes. Monitoring, evaluation, and learning meal. Recovery should be continuously assessed to ensure it's on track and responsive. Meal includes performance indicators, e.g., number of houses rebuilt, feedback loops from affected communities, adaptive management to respond to changing needs, knowledge sharing to learn from successes and failures. Conclusion. Recovery is a chance to reset, to not only repair what was lost but to build something stronger, more just, and more sustainable. It is where the seeds of resilience are sown. Through inclusive planning, community ownership, and smart investment, recovery becomes a powerful force for positive change. Part 7. Risk communication and public awareness. In times of crisis, information can save lives, just as misinformation can endanger them. Risk communication is the lifeline between authorities and communities before, during, and after disasters. It ensures that people not only receive vital information, but also understand it, trust it, and act on it. This part focuses on the importance of risk communication and public awareness in disaster risk reduction, DRR, and how building an informed public can be one of the strongest defenses against disaster impacts. What is risk communication? Risk communication is the real-time exchange of information, advice, and opinions between experts, officials, and people who face threats to their lives, health, or property. It involves issuing warnings, educating the public about risks, disseminating safety guidance, countering rumors and misinformation. Effective risk communication builds trust, enables informed decision-making, and promotes collective action. Key principles of risk communication. To be effective, risk communication should be timely. Messages must be sent as early as possible to allow people time to prepare or evacuate. Clear and understandable. Avoid jargon. Use plain language and visuals when necessary. Assume no prior knowledge. Consistent. Conflicting messages from different sources can confuse people and erode trust. Agencies should coordinate messaging. Culturally appropriate. Messages must reflect the language, values, and context of the community. Trustworthy. The messenger matters. People are more likely to listen to sources they trust: local leaders, community figures, or health professionals. Channels of communication. To reach people effectively, risk communication must use multiple layered platforms. Traditional media, TV, radio, newspapers, especially in rural areas. Digital media, social media, SMS alerts, mobile apps. Community outreach, loudspeakers, door-to-door visits, local leaders. Educational systems, schools and teachers as information hubs. Religious and cultural centers, often highly trusted within communities. Redundancy is key. If one channel fails, others must fill the gap. Early warning systems. Early warning systems, EWS, are among the most important tools for disaster risk communication. A functional EWS includes risk knowledge, understanding what hazards are likely. Monitoring and forecasting, using data to detect threats early. Warning dissemination, rapid delivery of alerts to the public. Response capability, ensuring people know what to do and have the means to do it. EWS must be people-centered, with local understanding and participation. Public awareness and education. Raising awareness is not just about one-off campaigns, it's about ongoing education. School programs. Teaching children about hazards, evacuation, and safety. Including DRR in national curricula. Creating school disaster preparedness plans. Community workshops. Risk mapping and participatory planning. Simulation exercises and drills. Community media initiatives, radio shows, street theater. Mass campaigns. National DRR days and public service announcements. Infographics and comics to explain risk and safety. Use of influencers and celebrities to amplify messages. Combating misinformation. In the digital age, misinformation spreads fast, especially during crises. Strategies to counter it include establishing verified information channels, rapidly debunking false claims with facts, working with social media platforms to flag and remove harmful content, training journalists on ethical disaster reporting. Community trust is the best defense against panic and rumors. Risk perception and behavior change. People don't always act on warnings, even when the risk is real. Why? Past experiences, it wasn't that bad last time. Belief systems or fatalism. Economic limitations, can't afford to evacuate. Lack of trust in authorities. Risk communication must address these barriers through targeted, empathetic messaging that considers behavior, psychology, and context. Inclusive communication. Not everyone receives or processes information the same way. Risk communication must be inclusive of people with disabilities, e.g., using sign language audio messages, non-native speakers or illiterate populations, elderly people, children, marginalized groups, e.g., migrants, nomads. Messages should be accessible, diverse in format, and tailored to all demographics. Role of technology and innovation. Emerging tools are enhancing how we communicate risk. AI-powered alert systems with real-time language translation. Geo-targeted messaging via mobile networks. Crowdsource data from social media to track events. Chatbots for 24/7 public information access. Virtual and augmented reality for educational training. Technology can empower, but it must be paired with equity and offline options. Monitoring communication effectiveness. Risk communication strategies should be measured and refined. Pre- and post-campaign surveys. Feedback mechanisms, hotlines, SMS polls. Community consultations. Media analysis and rumor tracking. Learning what works and what doesn't helps improve outcomes and build trust over time. Conclusion. An informed public is a safer public. Risk communication and public awareness are not secondary to crisis response, they are foundational. Whether through megaphones, mobile phones, or community meetings, the right message at the right time can mean the difference between safety and suffering. Part 8. Climate change and emerging threats. As the world changes, so do the risks we face. Climate change is not just an environmental issue, it is a risk amplifier. It intensifies natural hazards, stretches emergency systems, and threatens hard-won development gains. Alongside it, new threats like pandemics, cyber disruptions, and geopolitical conflicts are reshaping the landscape of crisis response and disaster risk reduction, DRR. This part examines the growing complexity of disaster risk in a changing world, and how we must adapt to stay resilient. Climate change as a risk multiplier. Climate change affects all dimensions of disaster risk. Frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, e.g., cyclones, heat waves, floods. Rising sea levels, threatening coastal communities and small island states. Increased droughts and desertification, affecting food and water security. Changing disease patterns with new vectors and health risks. These trends mean more people are exposed to hazards more often, and with less time to recover in between. Climate-related disasters on the rise. Data shows a clear upward trend in climate-related disasters. Wildfires in Australia, California, and the Mediterranean intensified by hotter, drier conditions. Mega floods in South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa due to erratic monsoons and land degradation. Deadly heat waves in Europe, India, and the Middle East. Stronger hurricanes and typhoons in the Atlantic and Pacific regions. These events no longer occur in isolation, they are interconnected and cumulative, placing pressure on people, economies, and ecosystems. Adapting disaster risk reduction to climate change. DRR strategies must now fully integrate climate adaptation. Key approaches include climate-smart infrastructure. Building flood-resistant roads and bridges. Using green roofs and permeable surfaces in cities. Coastal defenses like mangroves and seawalls. Climate-informed risk assessments. Incorporating climate models into hazard mapping. Forecasting multi-hazard scenarios, e.g., fire plus drought plus displacement. Resilient agriculture. Drought-tolerant crops. Rainwater harvesting. Climate services for farmers, e.g., seasonal forecast. Migration and displacement. Climate change is driving mass displacement. Sudden onset events, storms, floods cause short-term evacuation. Slow onset events, sea level rise, desertification create long-term migration. The world faces the rise of climate refugees, yet there is no international legal framework to protect them. DRR must support safe, dignified movement as a coping strategy. Integrate displacement planning into national resilience plans. Promote livelihood protection in areas at high risk of climate displacement. Urbanization and climate risk. Over half the world now lives in cities. Urban areas face unique risks: heat islands and poor air quality, overstressed drainage systems, slums located in high-risk zones, e.g., riverbanks, hillsides, infrastructure vulnerable to extreme events. Urban DRR must promote sustainable urban planning, resilient housing for the poor, integrated early warning systems, public transport systems that function during emergencies, pandemics and health crises. COVID-19 showed that non-traditional disasters like pandemics can shut down economies, overwhelm healthcare, and disrupt global supply chains. Key DRR lessons from pandemics. Health systems are critical infrastructure. Early surveillance and communication saves lives. DRR must include biological hazard planning. Coordination between health, emergency, and development sectors is essential. Pandemics and natural hazards can also compound each other, e.g., evacuating during a virus outbreak. Cyber threats and technological hazards. As societies become more connected, they become more vulnerable to cyber disruptions, including hacking of power grids or water systems, disruption of emergency communications, spread of misinformation through AI and bots, compromised digital health records during disasters. Cyber resilience is now a vital part of DRR, requiring strong IT infrastructure, cybersecurity training for responders, data protection protocols, crisis simulations for digital threats, conflict in fragile states. Many disasters occur in contexts already marked by conflict, weak governance, or political instability. Challenges include limited access to affected populations, lack of trust in authorities, aid politicization or misuse, attacks on humanitarian workers. In fragile settings, DRR must be conflict-sensitive, promoting local peacebuilding and inclusion, protection of civilians, strengthening civil society and governance, environmental degradation and risk. Human activities also drive disaster risk through deforestation and erosion, wetland destruction, pollution and waste mismanagement, over-extraction of groundwater. Nature-based solutions can reduce risk and restore balance, including reforestation, watershed management, agroecology, coral reef protection. Preparing for a new risk landscape. Facing these emerging threats requires transformative thinking in DRR. Moving from reactive to anticipatory risk management. Using scenario planning and future forecasting. Embracing cross-sector collaboration. Engaging youth and innovators in climate and risk action. Bridging science, policy, and grassroots action. Investing in resilience is not a cost. It's a long-term safeguard for people, planet, and prosperity. Conclusion. The 21st century is bringing complex, overlapping risks, driven by climate change, urbanization, technology, and social inequality. But it also offers unprecedented tools for foresight and resilience. The future of disaster risk reduction lies in our ability to anticipate, adapt, and transform. Part 9: Technology, Innovation, and the Future of Disaster Risk Reduction. As disasters grow in frequency and complexity, so too must the tools we use to face them. Today, innovation is transforming disaster risk reduction, DRR, from a reactive model to one that is smarter, faster, and more predictive. From artificial intelligence to drones, mobile apps to satellites, Technology is empowering communities and responders like never before. In this part, we explore how cutting-edge tools are reshaping the way we understand, prevent and respond to disasters, and what the future holds for DRR in a digital age. The digital revolution in disaster risk management. Modern technologies have opened new frontiers in risk assessment and mapping, early warning and forecasting, real-time communication, damage assessment, and recovery planning. These innovations enhance efficiency, accuracy, and reach, especially in resource-limited settings. Geographic Information Systems (GIS) and remote sensing. GIS and satellite imaging are foundational to modern DRR. Applications include hazard mapping, identifying flood zones, fault lines, and wildfire risks. Damage assessment, measuring post-disaster impact in hard-to-access areas. Evacuation planning, modeling safe routes and shelter access. Monitoring environmental changes, tracking deforestation, urban growth, glacier retreat. Case example: during the 2021 Haiti earthquake, satellite imagery was used to rapidly map damaged buildings and roads, helping prioritize aid. Artificial intelligence, AI and machine learning. AI is being used to analyze vast datasets, weather, social media, sensor feeds, to predict, detect, and respond to crises faster. Uses of AI in DRR. Flood forecasting using rainfall and topography models. Disaster chatbot assistants that provide real-time public guidance. Damage prediction models for cyclones or earthquakes. Sentiment analysis to detect panic, misinformation, or urgent needs. Note: AI must be trained with local data and continuously updated to avoid bias and ensure relevance. Drones and unmanned aerial vehicles (UAVs). Drones offer unique advantages in disaster zones, especially where roads are blocked or terrain is difficult. Key roles: aerial surveys after earthquakes or landslides. Delivery of supplies like medicine or food to remote areas. Search and rescue with thermal imaging. Monitoring flood levels or volcanic activity. Drones reduce risk to responders and improve the speed of data collection and analysis. Big data and crowdsourcing. Every tweet, phone ping, or digital footprint creates potential insights. Harnessing this big data can fill gaps in traditional disaster info systems. Examples: crowdsourced maps, e.g., OpenStreetMap, to navigate disaster-affected areas. SMS surveys to collect community feedback. Social media monitoring to track needs, rumors, or damage in real time. Mobile apps that allow users to report hazards or request help. The power lies in real-time, bottom-up intelligence. Early warning systems 2.0. Modern early warning systems go beyond sirens and radio announcements. They use integrated platforms for multi-hazard alerts, powered by predictive models and rapid dissemination channels. Innovations include geo-targeted mobile alerts with instructions. Wearables that notify users of seismic activity. AI-based flood and fire forecasts. Multilingual voice warnings, accessible to low-literacy users. Success depends not only on the tech, but on community trust and action. Smart infrastructure and IoT. The Internet of Things, IoT, enables everyday infrastructure to collect and share data, adding intelligence to resilience. Examples: sensors in bridges and dams to detect stress or weakness. Smart grids that reroute power during outages. Water level monitors for flood-prone rivers. Smart buildings that auto-lock or shut down systems during emergencies. These technologies help predict failure and reduce downtime. Mobile technology and apps. Mobile phones are lifelines in disasters. Their versatility makes them ideal for alert notifications. Digital ID systems for displaced persons. Mobile cash transfers to support recovery. Navigation and safety tips. Offline-ready tools for use in connectivity gaps. DRR apps can also educate users, store emergency contacts, and guide evacuation protocols. Virtual reality (VR) and simulation tools. Virtual simulations are powerful for training responders, community leaders, and the public. Benefits of VR in DRR. Safe, immersive disaster simulations. Evacuation drills in schools or offices. Risk scenario planning for decision makers. PTSD recovery tools for survivors. Gamification of training can increase engagement and retention, especially among youth. Ethical and access considerations. With great tech comes great responsibility. Challenges include data privacy and protection, exclusion of low-tech communities, algorithm bias, dependence on external or commercial providers, security risks, e.g., cyberattacks on warning systems. A rights-based inclusive approach is essential to ensure tech benefits all, not just the connected few. Conclusion. Technology is revolutionizing disaster risk reduction, but it is not a silver bullet. Tools must be integrated with local knowledge, community participation, strong institutions, and a clear understanding of social vulnerability. The future of DRR lies in the smart fusion of innovation with humanity. Part 10. Global Frameworks, Policies, and Partnerships. Disasters know no borders, and neither should solutions. To address the growing complexity of disaster risks, the global community has developed frameworks and forged partnerships that guide nations, institutions, and organizations in building safer, more resilient societies. This part explores the international policies, agreements, and collaborations that form the backbone of global disaster risk reduction, DRR, highlighting how they align to promote resilience, sustainability, and solidarity. Why global frameworks matter. Disasters are increasingly transboundary and systemic in nature. Climate change, pandemics, food insecurity, and displacement often intersect, affecting multiple countries and regions. Effective DRR requires shared knowledge and resources, coordinated response mechanisms, policy coherence across borders, accountability at all levels. Global frameworks offer a common language and set of priorities, helping governments, donors, and communities work toward collective goals. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, 2015 to 2030. The Sendai Framework is the world's most comprehensive DRR agreement, adopted by UN member states in 2015. It builds on earlier efforts, Hyogo Framework, and lays out a roadmap for reducing disaster losses in lives, livelihoods, and infrastructure. 4 priorities for action. Understanding disaster risk. Strengthening disaster risk governance. Investing in DRR for resilience. Enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and build back better. 7 global targets. Reduce global disaster mortality. Reduce affected people. Reduce economic losses. Reduce damage to infrastructure. Increase countries with DRR strategies. Enhance international cooperation. Increase early warning coverage and risk information access. The Sendai Framework emphasizes a shift from response to prevention, urging all stakeholders, governments, private sector, civil society, to take action. Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes DRR as essential to achieving its 17 goals, particularly Goal 1, No Poverty. Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. Goal 13, Climate Action. DRR supports long-term development by protecting gains and reducing future vulnerabilities. The SDGs and Sendai are mutually reinforcing. The Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Signed in 2015, The Paris Agreement is the global commitment to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. It links directly to DRR by promoting climate adaptation and resilience, supporting early warning systems and risk-informed planning, encouraging international finance for vulnerable countries. National adaptation plans, NAPs, and climate risk assessments help countries align DRR and climate goals. The humanitarian development peace nexus. Disasters often occur in contexts of fragility, conflict, and displacement. The UN and its partners now promote a triple nexus approach that integrates humanitarian aid, short-term response, development, long-term resilience, peacebuilding, stability, and conflict resolution. This model reduces duplication, enhances coordination, and addresses root causes of vulnerability. International DRR institutions and platforms. Several global bodies coordinate DRR efforts. UNDRR, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, leads global advocacy, policy development, and monitoring of the Sendai Framework. UN OCHA, Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, coordinates international emergency response and strengthens preparedness. IFRC, International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, supports disaster response and community resilience in over 190 countries. Global Platform for DRR, a biennial forum that brings together governments, experts, and stakeholders to assess progress and share best practices. Regional agreements and strategies. Regional bodies adapt global goals to specific contexts. Africa Program of Action for DRR. Asia Pacific, Asia Regional Plan for Implementation of the Sendai Framework. Europe, EU Civil Protection Mechanism and RESC-EU. Latin America and the Caribbean, Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management Framework. These strategies promote regional cooperation, joint training, shared resources, and cross-border response mechanisms. Public-private partnerships. The private sector plays a crucial role in DRR through risk-sensitive investments, business continuity planning, insurance and risk transfer mechanisms, technology and innovation. Frameworks like the ARISE initiative by UNDRR engage businesses in resilience building, civil society, and local action. Global frameworks are only effective when grounded in local action. NGOs, community groups, women's organizations, youth networks, and indigenous communities are key to translating policies into practice, holding governments accountable, mobilizing grassroots innovation, ensuring inclusive, participatory approaches. The Leave No One Behind principle is central to global DRR efforts. Financing for disaster risk reduction. Despite recognition of its importance, DRR remains underfunded globally. Key funding mechanisms. Green Climate Fund (GCF), Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery (GFDRR), Adaptation Fund, bilateral aid and humanitarian funds. Countries are encouraged to allocate national DRR budgets, create contingency reserves, and use catastrophe bonds or insurance schemes. Conclusion. The global frameworks and partnerships discussed in this part provide a roadmap for collective action in disaster risk reduction. But their success depends on strong political will, adequate funding, grassroots engagement, and cross-sector collaboration. Part 11. Community-Based Disaster Risk Reduction, CBDRR. At the heart of every disaster is a community, its people, culture, knowledge, and systems. While national governments and global frameworks provide critical support, it is local communities that are often the first to respond, the last to recover, and the best positioned to reduce risks. Community-Based Disaster Risk Reduction, CBDRR, puts people at the center of disaster resilience. This part explores the philosophy, tools, and impact of CBDRR, emphasizing how empowering communities strengthens overall disaster preparedness and response. What is community-based disaster risk reduction? CBDRR is a bottom-up approach that enables communities to identify and analyze their own risks, design and implement locally appropriate solutions, strengthen social cohesion and self-reliance, advocate for their needs and resources. It acknowledges that communities hold unique local knowledge, capacities, and coping mechanisms that top-down approaches often overlook. Principles of CBDRR. Successful CBDRR programs are based on the following core principles: participation, inclusive engagement of all community members, especially vulnerable groups; empowerment, building the capacity of communities to plan, decide, and act; sustainability, focusing on long-term resilience, not just short-term response; inclusivity, addressing gender, age, disability, ethnicity, and socioeconomic diversity; ownership, ensuring that communities lead and own the process, not just participate passively; community risk assessment and mapping. CBDRR starts with helping communities understand their own risk environment. Tools and methods include hazard mapping with local input, vulnerability and capacity assessments, VCA, seasonal calendars to track patterns of risk, transect walks to observe hazards and resources. These tools produce community risk maps that guide planning and preparedness activities. Community disaster preparedness plans. Once risks are identified, communities work together to create local disaster plans, which may include evacuation routes and drills, emergency communication protocols, safe shelter identification, first aid and search and rescue teams, resource inventories, water, food, transport. These plans are simple, clear, and practiced regularly to ensure readiness. Building local capacity. Capacity building is essential to CBDRR. It involves training people in disaster preparedness and response, first aid and psychosocial support, fire safety and hazard-specific skills, monitoring and early warning systems. This creates a network of community-based volunteers and responders, reducing dependence on external aid. Role of traditional knowledge and practices. Communities often have indigenous knowledge that can complement scientific approaches, such as traditional flood warning signs, e.g., animal behavior, indigenous water conservation techniques, building designs adapted to local hazards, agricultural practices that minimize risk. CBDRR respects and integrates this knowledge, validating local experience. Empowering marginalized groups. Resilience is not just technical, it is social and political. CBDRR actively promotes the participation of women, who often manage household-level risk and recovery, youth as change agents and innovators, elderly and persons with disabilities, whose needs are often overlooked, minorities and indigenous communities, who may face systemic exclusion. Programs must be gender-sensitive, accessible, and culturally appropriate. Social capital and community resilience. Social ties, family, neighbors, community groups are a powerful force in disaster resilience. CBDRR strengthens social capital by encouraging mutual aid and cooperation, revitalizing local leadership and trust, supporting community networks, e.g., savings groups, cooperatives, promoting civic participation in local governance. Communities that trust and support each other recover faster and adapt better. Linking communities to institutions. To scale impact, CBDRR efforts must be linked to formal systems, including local government DRR plans and budgets, National early warning systems. Schools, clinics, and religious institutions. Disaster insurance or risk financing mechanisms. Community initiatives thrive when supported, not replaced, by external actors. Challenges and limitations. CBDRR is not without obstacles. Limited funding and resources. Sustainability of volunteer engagement. Conflicts within or between communities. Lack of legal authority or recognition. Top-down planning that ignores local voices. Success requires ongoing support, monitoring, and adaptive learning. Case study: CBDRR in practice, Bangladesh. In cyclone-prone southern Bangladesh, community-based preparedness has saved thousands of lives. Key features include cyclone preparedness committees led by trained locals, color-coded early warning flags for each risk level, locally constructed cyclone shelters, community drills and awareness programs in schools. These grassroots initiatives are now linked to national disaster systems, creating a powerful model for other countries. Conclusion: community-based disaster risk reduction is more than a method. It's a movement toward equity, empowerment, and sustainability. By recognizing the strength and agency of local communities, we not only reduce risk, but build stronger, more resilient societies from the ground up.